welcome to the African Exodus show. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie, here to you with a new video. Before we get started with this African news segment, I want to remind you, if you want to stay connected outside of Rumble and YouTube, you can add yourself to my Telegram channel. There, I post anytime that I post on my channel, so you will get updates right to your phone. In addition, you can add yourself to my Patreon if you want to further support this channel. There, you will also receive a weekly exclusive just for you. With that, let's get started with African and world news. Now, while I was on break, I got news that Kenya, who has been working with the United States in order to train their own police officers to invade Haiti, has essentially been halted in going forward with this mission. The reason is because their Supreme Court had said that the move was unconstitutional. However, unfortunately, I have to report to you that the president of Kenya has vowed that they are still going to send those troops. This is a reminder to us that democracy inside of Africa is not democracy in the sense of representation of the will of the people. It isn't anywhere, but Africa especially the case. So Kenya plans to bypass court order in Haiti deployment. Kenya's government will not await a court order of appeal ruling before deploying its forces to Haiti, a senior government official said, further underscoring the government's determination to move ahead with the proposed multinational force aimed at bringing stability to the gang-ravaged Caribbean nation. Abraham Correa Singh Oy, the president's secretary in Ministry of Foreign Affairs, told the New York Times in an interview that Kenya and Haiti were working to finalize a bilateral agreement in the next 2 weeks, and that once in place, Kenya forces would immediately deploy. The declaration from Mr. Singh Oy comes just a week after the country's high court blocked the deployment of 1,000 police officers, saying it could go ahead only if there was a reciprocal agreement detailing the framework under which Kenya forces can cooperate in Haiti. Kenya's government appealed the decision. Mr. Singh Oy said the High Court provided a legal pathway for the deployment, namely the bilateral reciprocal agreement with Haiti, but he said the government was appealing the decision to a higher court anyway to seek clarification on some findings the government found was problematic. Still, he added, the deployment does not have to await the conclusion of this appeal. So in layman's terms, essentially, the court mentioned that they want the government to provide a bilateral reciprocal agreement with Haiti. Provide that, and then we'll see if it will be constitutional. They're saying, okay, we'll provide it, and we're still going to go, regardless of whether or not you find it legal. This shows you that, like I said, the idea that democracy works the same in Africa as it does other places in the world is laughable. You have to understand that the president of Haiti or president of Kenya is clearly getting paid by the United States to do this initiative. And because he is in the executive chair, he's going to do whatever he deems necessary in order to fulfill his commitment. He probably has a lot that is now on his head because I'm sure he received money from the Biden administration. So because politics operate differently in Africa and other global South countries, they are not beholden to the people. They're more beholden to their masters. They're beholden to the world order, the United States, European nations, and in NATO. They are beholden to them instead of beholden to their people. So when people tell you democracy is something that we should aspire to, you should point out examples like this, where democracy does not work the same in Africa as it does for the West. And even in the West, we know that democracy is not the fulfillment of what they say it is. It's not a representative government. It's a representation of the elite and those who are with the means to bribe politicians, not those who are regular lay persons. So with that, let's go to the next story. People are really fearing the possibility of war inside of Eastern Africa, particularly between Ethiopia and Somalia. Now, Ethiopia, the country, did a move, and we reported on it. It was on my Patreon recently that Ethiopia did a move in order to get access to a seaport. Remember, they were trying to negotiate with Eritrea. They were trying to negotiate with Somalia. They were trying to negotiate with Djibouti in order to get access to a seaport because Ethiopia, the country, is landlocked. Well, Ethiopia found a way around that. That is essentially they negotiated an agreement with Somaliland. Somaliland has been operating separately from Somalia for some time now, I believe since the 90s. However, Somalia still regards Somaliland as their own nation. Well, Somalia is threatening war, and this could be very significant for what is going to happen going forward. So it says, Ethiopia signed a memorandum of understanding with the breakaway region of Somaliland on January 1st. The document has not been made public, but still Somaliland says Ethiopia agreed to recognize its independence in return for a naval port. The deal has rattled Somalia, which asserts that Somaliland is part of Somalia. Somalia's president has suggested he is ready to go to war with Ethiopia to prevent it from building a port there. Addressing lawmakers on Tuesday, Abiy said he had no intention of going to war with Somalia. To ensure the peace of Somalia, thousands of Ethiopians have died in Somalia, he said, as a reference to Ethiopia's troop contribution to the African Union peacekeeping mission fighting the extremist group Al-Shabaab in Somalia. He said, we are dying in Somalia because the peace of Somalia is the peace of Ethiopia. The development of Somalia is the development of our country. We believe we are brothers, Abiy said. We don't want to fight. We want to see a strong and prosperous Somalia that is a market for Ethiopian goods. Abiy also sought to allay Egyptian fears over the huge hydroelectric dam Ethiopia is building on the Blue Nile. We will share our resources even in the future, but my hope is I expect them to accommodate our request as well. Ethiopia says the mega dam is essential for its development and claims it will have no negative effect on the downstream Sudan and Egypt, who fear it will impact the water supply. Practically all of Ethiopia's 109 million people rely on Nile waters. There have been several rounds of talks over the dam, but the sides have failed to reach an agreement to regulate its use. The latest negotiations were in December. So Ethiopia has, in my opinion, two plausible fronts of a possible war. One, because Ethiopia, being landlocked, wants access to the sea, and they negotiated an agreement with Somaliland, which, it's understandable because they're landlocked. They're one of the, most powerful nations in Africa, but they don't even have the ability to have a navy. But they did so with a breakaway province that Somalia views as stepping on, essentially treading on their territory. And then also the dam that has been in talks for a long time, because Egypt has kind of alluded to the fact that they could go to war with Ethiopia if Ethiopia proceeds forward with building a dam that would regulate the Nile. And again, the dam would be within Ethiopia's borders, but still that would affect how much water that Egypt and Sudan get from the Nile. So it's important for us to know that it seems that there's a possibility for a future regional conflict, particularly with Abiy Ahmed being the one to try to defend these decisions. So we're going to see how this culminates. Burkina Faso has exited ECOWAS, something that many people could have seen coming, because for a long time there's no real reason to be a part of ECOWAS. They essentially conspired to close the borders of these countries. They conspired to undo the coups that happened. So this is something that was a long time coming. It says, on January 28th, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger took a historic decision to withdraw from the Economic Community of West African States. It is carefully considering its decision, which came after a thorough analysis of the institution and potential consequences of withdrawal. Authorities believe ECOWAS doesn't meet the aspirations of the Sahelian peoples anymore, rendering the AES alliance necessary. Premier Minister Apollinaire Joachim Keleum de Tabila condemns ECOWAS sanctions against his country, Mali and Niger, and also accused the bloc of failure to assist its member states. Instead of an ECOWAS of the people, the organization has become a technocratic tool that ultimately deviated from the legitimate aspirations of the West African peoples. For proof, we noted ECOWAS' indifference when our violent people were massacred, as our fellow citizens endure humanitarian crises, or the face of the numerous destabilization attempts our states have encountered, he said. Burkina Faso said it has notified the 15-nation bloc of its decision. The AES countries have called on their populations to mobilize in support of the move in the coming.
This is what was going to happen. How are you going to be a part of an economic bloc that is sanctioning you to an oblivion? And of course, ECOWAS has made it their stated purpose at this point to essentially undo the coups that happen inside of these West African nations. So it's not surprising. It's surprising that it took this long. What's interesting to note, though, is that the countries that have been positioning themselves as the people who are going to instill democracy inside of these regions, they don't really have any leg to stand on right now as far as what gives them the right to do so. So what are they going to do? Are they going to let it go? Are they going to let Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger go forward as far as continuing with the governing structure that they have? Or are they going to basically get help from the West in order to bolster their own military going into these other countries, which is something that I think that they're going to be looking to do. So I don't think this is necessarily an end to this conflict. I do think that the ECOWAS countries all have their own issues to deal with, so maybe this might not be pressing on their agenda list, but I certainly think there's going to be some further moves in order to try to instill democracy inside of these countries that have gone rogue. So with that, let's go to the next story. Elon Musk's Neuralink technology has been installed into a human brain, and now a lot of people are getting nervous because some people have speculated this could be the mark of the beast. So it goes on to say that Neuralink's device is about the size of a coin. It's inserted into the skull with microscopic wires, which can read neuron activity and beam back a wireless signal to a receiving unit. The company has run its trials in pigs and claimed that monkeys can play a basic version of ping pong. But it has also gotten received approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for human trials, which we know that they don't really count too much as far as being qualified to make those decisions. But it says we now know that the first patient has received their implant. A human being has this implant, but details are thin on the ground. Musk has said the person is recovering well, and initial results show a promising neuron spike detection. For Elon Musk, solving the brain spinal injuries is just the first step from Neuralink. The long-term goal is human AI symbiosis, something he describes as a species-level important. The real trick will be developing a system which can interrupt or interpret or translate the signals coming from the brain with a far greater level of accuracy. If and when that happens, humans may be able to communicate with computers and other electronic devices in a way that is difficult to comprehend today. Imagine being able to order a takeaway from your thoughts or search for the internet or translate one language to another immediately in your head by just thinking about it. Musk himself has already talked about a future where his device could allow people to communicate with a phone or computer faster than a speed typist or auctioneer. Now, people have speculated this could be the mark of the beast, the reason being because we know that there's a technological component. As the scriptures say, the beast system will not allow you to buy or purchase anything without their approval, and we know the only way that can happen is with technology. And obviously the 666 is a number that makes us believe that it's some type of technological code. So I do believe that this can potentially be what the scriptures is referring to. Sorry, everyone had to have a mic switch and camera switch, but essentially going back to the issue, we don't know if this is what it's going to be. We should never put all of our eyes on what they're telling us. We should be focused on what they're not telling us. There are other types of brain chip type of technology that is also being developed right now. So certainly this is one that we're being told to look at. It's one a lot of people are nervous about. Is this what it is? We won't know until we're forced into a system that tells us you can't buy or sell without it. But it's definitely important to note this idea that is being advertised as saving grace to humanity. Essentially, we have to merge humans with machines to save humans, which is asinine to me. But a lot of people believe in this idea that we can save ourselves, that we should not look to Yah, but that we should look to ourselves internally. And because of that, the world is going to be misled. We just don't know what point is going to be the ultimate misleading. So with that, let's go to the next story. And last but not least, Djibouti has stepped up its Coast Guard patrols because we know there's a lot happening inside of the Red Sea and Djibouti is right in a line of fire. Djibouti has intensified Coast Guard patrols along its strategic waterway as the Red Sea crisis unfolds. When you're securing something, not only the sea, and something happens, you need to increase the time before which is coming and which is currently going on, said Colonial West Omar Bugore. of the Djibouti Coast Guard. That's why we increase our capabilities. We increase how secure the area is more than before, according to the situation currently going on in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, and Bab al-Mandab. Djibouti has achieved economic growth, it says, during the past decade. An ongoing crisis could negatively impact the coastal nation. The country hosts several foreign military bases. Now, this is the part I wanted to emphasize. It's not several. They have more military bases than any other place in the world. All foreign, none for themselves. All foreign. The United States, Russia, all foreigners having military bases in this very small country, okay? But they're not a part of the U.S.-led coalition that has launched airstrikes against the Houthi. They said, we have a lot of friends of several countries working on the sea, and some of them have been stationed in isolation on the coast. We're working closely. We'll collaborate and coordinate all missions related to security. To me, I think what's happening, Djibouti in themselves do not have a strong naval capacity, but obviously people like the U.S., China, all these other places do. Clearly, the United States is utilizing the relationship with Djibouti in order to be able to regulate the Red Sea. This is not a territory where they're used to being at. So that's what they're probably doing as far as collaborating with the countries of the U.S. And I think the UK is also over there and a few other countries. But this is also significant. All of this is the same region. Djibouti, Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, all of these countries kind of being brought into different conflicts, but not directly. We haven't seen something directly happen yet. But I promise you, because of the biblical significance of this area of the world, sooner or later we're going to see direct conflict boiling over. So with that, I thank you all for watching, and y'all willing, I'll see you all in the next video.
Marcus Mosiah Garvey once said, "The prejudice of the white folks of the United States of America is not so much because they hate your color. It is because they hate your condition, and it is because they are human beings why they hate. Although they have not said as much to you, that is how they feel over the question. That is the bone of contention, not because you are black, but because they believe that they are entitled to all the benefits that America can give, because they built up America to suit themselves, and whatsoever we have done to build up America, we did it as slaves, and they haven't used us as slaves. They are not responsible for our condition." This is the white guilt complex.
I think that white people are so guilty, knowing what they've done to black people, that they feel if the deeds were reversed, they would hate the black man if he had done the same thing to them. So it actually reflects a guilt complex on the part of whites when they ask us, do we hate them? And if you notice, Uncle Sam has formed a habit of going all over the world. He calls it the ugly American, or the American image. He thinks that everybody hates him because of a guilt complex. And if you think that if you are worried about Europeans hating you, and they're your allies and your cousins, well, naturally it would follow for you to think that Negroes in this country would hate you, especially in light of what has been done to black people in this country by white people.
And ask Minister Farrakhan to respond. Whom didn't we? Yes.
I would just like to say that I am terrified that even you, someone who's obviously educated, has given up hope completely. Like when you call upon us, you say white folk, you say black people, Jewish people. Why can't we come together? We obviously can come together. We just have to. We just have to find a way to do it.
The desire is good, but the reality is the total opposite of your desire. And unfortunately, as a young lady, you are not in the position of power to make the decisions to make America work. May I, as an audience of intelligent people, I would like to just take a moment to say to you that I really don't think you fully understand what has happened to these people that you look at as second class or inferior citizens in this nation. Black people who were brought to this country were stripped of their names, language, culture, religion, God, and taken totally away from the history of themselves. Here are 30 million people who don't wear their own names, they wear your names, who don't speak their own language, they speak English, which is not their language. They never were allowed their own cultural expression of Africa. Don't you realize that when you turn a people upside down and inside out, then sell them not for a day, not for a year, but for 300 years and deny us the human right to know, to read a book, to learn, to understand. And then after 300 years of that, you allow us into the church, but by that time you've painted Jesus white, God white, the angels white, and then all these black people have been subjected to a form of white supremacy, which produces in the reverse a black inferiority. And this is fulfilling what Jesus said, as a man thinketh, so is he. And as long as our people think the way they think, we will never be able to do what we as a people should do to correct our condition.
Over here.
Excuse me, I was brought up in, quote, Bedford-Stuyvesant in my time. But I would like to say what scares us is I think we hear violence.
The young lady said she's afraid of violence. And isn't it sad that we who have been the victims of so much violence, now whites fear violence from us? We do not have a history of killing white people. White people have a history of killing us. See? And what you fear, may I say this, sir? What you fear, it is a deep guilt thing that white folks suffer. You are afraid that if we ever come to power, we will do to you and your fathers what you and your people have done to us. And I think you are judging us by the state of your own mind, and that is not necessarily the mind of black people.